Welcome everyone to Wrasslin Raw!
Right, you're listening to Wrasslin Raw, the podcast that takes you back to when the new generation took over the WWF. Thank you for joining us. You're here with Ryan Arico.
Oh, look. Just look what you've done to my Undertaker.
Joe Gimateo.
I'm taking you fools to school because I'm cool like the water in a swimming pool.
Wow. I'm really glad that you'd said that, by the way, because there was no way in hell I was going to quote it later.
Just call me Joey Ice.
I'm the one and only Jason Bartlett, and we're going to examine WWE history one episode of Raw at a time. But first, a brief shout out and thank you to our new listeners in West Virginia, USA, and in the nation of Hungary. Good to see that you guys are out there downloading us and catching a listen to what we're doing here. We appreciate you. In this episode of Wrasslin Raw, we're going to be talking about the Raw that aired on October 16th, 1995. This Raw was recorded at the Grand Center in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and features Vince McMahon and Jerry the King Lawler on commentary. Are you guys ready?
I'm ready.
Ready.
All right, then, let's get into it. We're going to kick it off with promos for our cage match later tonight. First up is Isaac Yankem, DDS. He's not too shabby in this, given what he has to work with. He does end up going a touch cartoony for my taste, as he grips the bars and shakes them and goes, "Argh!" Very undentist-like behavior there.
The biggest set of braces.
All the tooth puns.
Oh, God.
Then it's Bret Hart's turn. And I'm sure someone was there forcing Bret to add the DDS after saying Isaac Yankem, because it really felt like somebody was there with a gun pointed at Bret Hart, forcing him to do all of this. He was not excited. Or at least that's the impression that I got. Then it's Jerry Lawler. Suffice it to say that the use of dental terms is prolific in this. I will not quote them, but he manages to make every single dental pun he possibly can in about 15 seconds. It's almost disgusting. We'll cut to the Nitro Light intro. And I gotta say, the more I hear this, the more it sounds like something I know. Like it's, you know how they knock off other songs to do other things? I can't put my finger on it, but the guitar chops in the intro here, it really sounds like something else that already exists, or maybe will come to exist later on. I don't know. Hopefully I can figure that out and get back to everybody with it. We come out of that intro sequence, and we go into our first match of the night. Hunter Hearst Helmsley defeats Doink the Clown by pinfall in 3 minutes and 53 seconds. Hunter is there in the ring as we get going here, and he's spraying cologne from an atomizer. Pretty close to crossing the gimmick line, but still mildly entertaining. I will give him that. Because it's Hunter, we can accept that, I think. There's some brief talk about that cage above the cage, but thankfully we didn't spend too much time on that. We can get to what we've all been looking forward to, and that's Donk the Clown. All right. Yeah, this was definitely a different guy in the clown makeup. This was not the same Donk that made us groan for months and months. The tights don't fit this guy right. He's a completely different body shape. He actually looks like he's a couple inches shorter, too. Not the same Donk, so I don't know what we would call this guy. Donk Light, maybe? I don't know. We'll work on that. Well, I realized during the opening series here that this was the same crappy referee from that PG-13 match that we had 2 weeks ago. And, you know, the notes really didn't pile up on this one. I did love Jerry Lawler calling Hunter's bow genuflecting, with Vince saying in response, "Well, I don't think that's genuflecting." It's really jarring, even with Helmsley having his own specific gimmick, to have the clown there in the ring in contrast. It was even more apparent to me here that we need to and are trying to move on past the cartoon shit. And as I say that, I realize that I'm still going to put over Goldust later, so I might just be full of it. And then, pedigree. Somewhat out of nowhere, and the match was over. You know, I wish I had more to say about this match, especially given that Hunter Hearst Helmsley was in it, but nothing really jumped out at me in it at all. This just kind of existed. Ryan, what did you think of this match?
It was okay, you know, like you said, it was clearly a different Donk Light, whatever you want to call this iteration of Doink the Clown, but there was someone else in there, and while still not nearly as good as the original Doink the Clown Matt, he was better than the last Donk. He wasn't great by any means, but I did think he worked better. It wasn't straight armbar, sidewalk slam, and that's it. Out of our last Donk, that was kind of the entire run of his moves. So that was a little bit better to see here. We also learn that the Undertaker's face was crushed in this match. It's brought up that he was injured during the fat ass after fat ass from Mabel and Yokozuna, that he did actually receive an injury here. And this is going to bring us into the short period where he wears the Phantom of the Opera mask. And I just wanted to touch on something real quick here, that just a little bit of information. The Mankind mask is actually a prototype mask for The Undertaker that they came up with. It's one they didn't end up using. They went with the Phantom of the Opera looking mask, and they held on to this one, and in about a year or a little less than, they will refit it for Mankind, and it will become his infamous mask. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The rest of the match goes, you know, it's there. You know, like you said, there's not a ton to talk about other than some of the points that really annoyed me. Donk the Clown grabs Hunter's giant schnoz and just kind of leads him around the ring. Dumb as fuck. Cartoon bullshit. Immediately after that, Donk starts wiggling his ass. It was dumb as all hell. You know, this guy was definitely a better wrestler, but they are cranking up the cartoon character bullshit to 11 here, and it's unnecessary. Outside of the annoyances of those things, I thought this was a serviceable match and one of the better Donk matches that we've seen since Matt has left.
Yeah, while we received the bad news about The Undertaker, Ryan, you mentioned the mask, so we know that he'll be back at some point soon. I have some good news for you guys.
Oh, okay.
I looked this up, and I'm pretty sure this is Donk's last television appearance for quite some time. So,
or until he comes back for like a Royal Rumble or something.
Yeah, gimmick bullshit later on. So I think we're done with Donk. So that's cool. That's nice.
Yeah.
And we love you up in Grand Rapids, Michigan, of course, but no Kill the Clown chant. I was kind of disappointed.
Yeah.
But this match was pretty bad, I think. Bad by Donk, mostly.
Yeah.
He sold and took that pedigree so horribly. I mean, it was just, it was so bad. But, you know, we still get to see Hunter Hearst Helmsley, which is nice. And just a little bit more on The Undertaker. According to Dave Meltzer, it happened on the Thursday before this Raw, I think. It was a clothesline that Mabel was giving him at a house show that was botched, and Undertaker his face ran into Mabel's fist, and it just crushed his orbital bone. I watched his interview with Joe Rogan, and he actually said that this happened, and then he was like, he didn't go to the hospital until days later. Like, he didn't realize it was that bad.
Wow.
So, yeah, pretty interesting, but sounds like he'll be back soon.
He had no words for Mabel, though. I'm guessing he's kind of too much of a professional for that, I think.
He did mention that, like, you know, hey, this guy was known for hurting people.
Yeah.
You know, he didn't really know what he was doing, but he didn't like totally bury him either. So, yeah.
Well, interesting.
Well, now that we know that The Undertaker is kind of going to be out of commission briefly here in the upcoming weeks, we can focus on what's really important. And that is the Americanization of Hakushi. And the way that Vince says it, let's go now to the Americanization of Hakushi. The way that Vince says it, it really makes it sound like high literature here. But there's nothing literary about this. This was Barry Horowitz taking it upon himself to teach Hakushi the ways of America. And in this particular case, it happens to be a discussion of baseball. I have to note that thankfully Horowitz is wearing an Ico Pro t-shirt and baseball cap. He is not wearing a white collar shirt with a pocket protector and Coke bottle glasses like I honestly expected him to be. Poor Hakushi, he didn't look like he had any kind of interest in playing along with this at all. I'm not sure if that was just him doing a stoic type gimmick maybe, but, or maybe he just honestly didn't understand what was going on and was playing along as best he could due to the language barrier, who knows, but all in all, I'm pretty sure this is the first time we've seen Barry Horowitz starring in a vignette of his own. Ryan, what did you think of it?
It was a bit odd. Hakushi just saying Hank Aaron, kind of.
Yeah.
But I'm excited for Barry Horowitz. This isn't the greatest vignette in existence by any means, but hey, Barry, you got your own vignette. Way to go.
Yeah, I think that, this wasn't great, but I feel like this has potential to be kind of funny moving forward, possibly. And Hakushi, I think we know that the run is not going to last very long, but I feel like he really should have been a babyface from the beginning.
Yeah, that's a great point. I can see that. I think I could have gotten behind Hakushi. Not that I've ever not been behind him, but I think with a babyface style push, it might have been a little more effective. I was really happy to see Barry Horowitz not wearing his Hava Nagila bullshit from the gimmick that they're pushing on him. Between his appearance here in this vignette and whenever he comes down to the match, how quickly he rips that shit off and goes to the back padding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, happy to see that he's trying to buck that gimmick as hard as he can and get it and distance himself from it, it seems. Well, we come out of that vignette and go into our next match. The Smoking Guns defeat PG-13 by pinfall in 5 minutes and 5 seconds to retain the WWF Tag Team titles. First and foremost, I really hate the look of PG-13. Can't stand seeing them. Don't want to see them again, regardless of their work in the ring. They just, they don't fit. And I hate to say that. As somebody that loves the cruiserweights, as somebody that likes diversity in wrestling, can't stand the way that they look here. And I will touch on that a little bit later here. We get a promo from PG-13 to kick off this match. This is picture in picture. And this is where they cut a little rap for us. Joe quoted it earlier on, so I don't have to. Then, with the Smoking Guns entrance, we get another picture-in-picture. This time, this is interim President Gorilla Monsoon informing us that for the first time ever, Mabel and Yokozuna will meet in the ring.
Girth versus girth.
Yeah.
That seems terrible.
Yeah, it feels incorrect, but for anybody out there like me who initially thought that was wrong, they have met, just not as singles. They met in a tag match. Yeah, we saw that
tag match,
Yeah.
That's a way of saying that Yokozuna will be filling in for The Undertaker at In Your House 4, so.
It makes you kind of wonder, too, is there going to be a babyface turn here, maybe? With Yokozuna. Who knows?
That might be at odds with Owen and the Bulldog and Cornette. I look forward to what happens with that.
Banzai!
Yeah. I have to point out that the Smoking Guns make PG-13 look like scrawny teenagers. And this is what I referenced earlier. I like Rey Mysterio going up against a big guy. I like a Chris Candido going up against a big guy. That stuff doesn't bother me in the least bit. But for whatever reason, maybe it's because those little guys actually had some kind of physique to them, whereas PG-13 really just looks like scrawny teenagers. Maybe they worked for the city of Newcastle over the summer and got a little bit of muscle from whipping around a weed whacker. Joe, did you know people that looked like these guys?
They had maybe slightly more girth than these guys.
Well, you never know.
But yeah, I mean, that's a pretty good comparison. I mean, like I said last week, these guys remind me of the best tag team you would see at some shitty indie show somewhere.
The Newcastle Schoolhouse.
Yeah.
They look like Public Enemy if they, Public Enemy lost some weight. I was entertained throughout this match in the same way that a bad movie can be entertaining. Even though it's bad, it can still kind of entertain you. This was mostly the Guns just making PG-13 look bad. Until we got to a spot that was a cartoon chase around the ring. Bart chasing one half of PG-13 while the other half beat on Billy Gunn, then they alternate back and forth. It really took me out of it. That just took my interest level down quite a bit. It wasn't long after that things wind down into the finish. The Guns set up their finisher, which at that point, I wasn't even really able to get excited about it. And the icing on the cake for this is that going into the 3 count, one half of PG-13 trips going through the ropes to try to stop the pin. Bart's there to stop him. Bart's a professional and he's ready to go. He doesn't even have to. He just throws his arms up in the air as if, what the fuck am I supposed to do with this? And that's it. I don't really know what else to say about this. I didn't exactly have any expectations going into it, but it really just felt like what it literally was. This was the WWF Tag Champs against a couple of amateurs. Joe, what did you think of this match?
Well, I can't add much. It's already been said, really. If Vince is bringing these guys in to beef up the tag team division, it ain't working. And it's easy to tell. Last week we saw them against jobbers and we thought, they look okay. And then we saw them against the best and it's like, okay, this isn't working.
Yeah.
Time to move on.
Yeah, you guys kind of covered it here. I got a few things to add, I guess. We said last week we were maybe slightly interested in some of their ring work. They were at least athletic in there. But being up against the Smoking Guns, their size difference was just glaring. You have the Smoking Guns, you have these two big, tall beefcakes, and then you had these scrawny kids who need to fucking get on the gas quick. If they're going to go anywhere, they need to get on the gas. Running around the ring, that was kind of dumb. As you said, it just kind of takes you out of the match. There was a spot where it kind of got okay for a little bit, where the Smoking Guns were just kind of manhandling them, and PG-13 was doing some backflips and stuff that were visually entertaining, at least a little bit, but it didn't last very long. One of the most entertaining things of the match was commentary. I got a kick out of when Vince asked Jerry why this team is called PG-13, and Lawler responds, well, because their mom still has to take them to the movies. And that's absolutely correct. That's what it looks like. We got a couple fucking 12-year-old punks here that will be telling you that they fucked your mom on Xbox Live or something. Not great. The tag team division is really hurting right now in the WWF, but sadly, these two little kids aren't going to do much to help.
Yeah.
You said that, and did you guys hear that Razor Ramon and 123 Kid will be facing the Smoking Guns at In Your House? They announced it during this match.
Yeah.
So again, we're just putting guys together to try to get some tag matches.
Well, speaking of divisions that are in a sorry state of affairs, we come back out of that match to something that was just really disappointing to be reminded of, and that's the women's division in the WWF. It really kind of angers me. I'm not talking just exaggeration for entertainment's sake here on the podcast, but deep down inside, it really angers me that they're acting like they give a shit at all about the women's division. I know that the end is coming soon, but they really need to just put this shit out of its misery. And it makes me appreciate Alundra Blaze and what she ends up doing on national television that much more. It gives it a certain amount of power. As if I needed anything to reinforce that, we get here the news that next week on Raw, Alundra Blaze is going to challenge Bertha Faye for the women's title. And I can't get excited about that because we've seen that already, and it isn't good. But let's take you now to an interview conducted this past weekend between Doc Hendricks, the British Bulldog, and Jim Cornette. They give us a replay of that truly lackluster finish to the 6-man tag match from Raw last week. And, I really hate to say it again, but I just didn't feel any energy in this interview. We get talk from both Cornette and the Bulldog, but neither of them was able to get me excited or expectant for the Bulldog's upcoming match against Diesel at In Your House. After a commercial break, we come back now to a video package on Ahmed Johnson, a man who had his values together long before the Million Man March. What the fuck? I don't know what the correct term for that is. Is that virtue signaling? I don't know, but it feels like some extra information that we just really didn't need about Ahmed Johnson. This is going to follow that old format that we had with LT and Bam Bam Bigelow. It's the word association game. And they keep it to one word here, and we will see why. Ahmed does an okay job. His voice cracks at one point, and he is honestly just kind of hard to understand. Just throwing it out there, I'm not sure what it is. Maybe it's his pacing. He didn't enunciate his words very clearly. But that being said, it was nice to see him on screen. Hopefully, the Ahmed experience gets better. I'm on record in the past as stating that Ahmed Johnson was a favorite from childhood, and I'm looking forward to seeing if he continues to stack up against that nostalgia that I have for him. So, all in all, we had a decent amount of different content here in between matches, Joe. So, Joe, what did you think of that upcoming women's match and the Bulldogs interview and our first sample of Ahmed Johnson?
I think with the women's match, it's just, it is what it is. There's nothing we can do about that. I've heard early to mid 2000s, even when they had more women wrestling like Trish Stratus, Lita, and like Jackie and all them, like they were only getting 2-3 minutes in the ring. So we're so far away from a real women's division that it's disappointing, I guess, during this time because Alundra is so good. The Bulldog interview, I'm kind of with you, Bartlett. I like the Bulldog. I like his wrestling matches. I like Jim Cornette, but there's just something that's not, it's very forgettable. Like this time for Bulldog is just very forgettable. And I think we're kind of seeing why. It's just same old stuff, I guess. I don't know. Nothing too exciting there. And Ahmed Johnson, I'm excited to see him as an adult because I don't really remember him really that great. As a kid, I liked him, but it'll be nice to see it all again.
Yeah, starting off with the women's division thing, obviously seeing Bertha Faye in another match is unfortunate. But at least maybe we can rectify this mistake and put the belt back on Alundra. Not that it's going to matter. Not that she'll have anyone else to go up against that will matter, but at least get the belt off Bertha Faye. We're all three in agreement here on this locker room talk with Jim Cornette and the Bulldog. They do a perfectly fine job on the mic. They don't really mess up on anything. I think it's just that I just don't care about the match is part of the problem. It's not maybe anything against Cornette and the Bulldog. It's just this match is lackluster, so it's tough for me to get excited for it. Ahmed Johnson is, man, does he look like a fucking monster?
Yeah.
He is enormous. His promo was a little bit tough to follow, though. Talk about his mom and love and respect and whatnot. I'm excited to see what things for him move forward, because I certainly remember him from my childhood.
Yeah, we fall along the same lines on all of this here, it seems like. Hopefully Ahmed's promo here isn't indicative of the future. Hopefully he cleans that up a little bit, but I am very much looking forward to finding out. That vignette with Ahmed Johnson will take us into our next match. Dean Douglas defeats Joe Dorgan by pinfall in 2 minutes and 52 seconds. And Joe Dorgan is our Jobber of the Week. Take it, Ryan.
Thank you, Jason. Joe Dorgan is this week's jobber. Joe Dorgan is his birth name, and he was born on July 3rd, 1975 in Niagara Falls, New York. He has used the ring names Johnny Paradise, Johnny Parisi, Johnny Swinger, Johnny Hollywood Swinger, Just Swinger, and of course, Joe Dorgan. Dorgan was trained by Ron Hutchison and Sweet Daddy Sicky, making his... Sweet Daddy Sicky. I don't know what to tell you. That was the guy's name. Making his ring debut in early 1993 for the Toronto, Canada promotion Border City Wrestling. In July of 95, he would shortly work for WCW before joining WWF for only 3 matches. His opponents were this match with Dean Douglas, a match on WWF Superstars against Hunter Hearst Helmsley, and finally on October 23rd, 1995 against Marty Jannetty, of course losing all 3. Joe spent almost a year with Cleveland All Pro Wrestling before signing with the WCW, where he would stay for the rest of the 90s. In 2000, Dorgan joined ECW and remained with them until they folded in April of 2001. He then returned to WCW, only to again lose his job when the company that he is wrestling for folded after the WWF purchased WCW in February of 2001 and did not bring him over. After the fall of WCW, Joe spent the next year bouncing between indie promotions before joining TNA in July of 2002. He would stay with TNA for 3 years, teaming up with Jeff Jarrett and starting a stable known as the New York Connection. Throughout 2005 and 2006, Dorgan was signed to a developmental contract with the WWE, starting at Ohio Valley Wrestling, a developmental promotion run by the WWE. He became a common face on WWE Heat, now using the name Johnny Parisi, a combination of his ring name and his great-uncle Tony Parisi, a former WWF superstar from the 60s and 70s. Joe was released by the WWE after a loss on Heat to Kane on June 29, 2006. After that, Dorgan returned to the independent circuit for the next 13 years, wrestling for an almost uncountable amount of promotions, but was most successful with Great Championship Wrestling based out of Phoenix City, Alabama. And this is a little bit something that connects it to us here in our podcast. In 2017, Dorgan began co-hosting The Raven Effect podcast with fellow pro wrestler Raven. However, after a couple weeks, he was replaced by comedian and former WCW employee Butsby Berkeley and backyard wrestler Joseph Feeney due to poor ratings. In 2019, he returned to TNA, now known as Impact Wrestling, and started using a gimmick as a villainous, out-of-touch 80s wrestler, and tried to start a feud with Kent Shamrock, but they never had a match together. Instead, the feud ended after Dorgan received a one-sided beatdown backstage by Shamrock. Joe Dorgan is still signed with Impact Wrestling, and is mostly used as a manager these days. But over his long career, he may have never held a belt for a major promotion. However, Joe has held an impressive list of small promotion championships. To name a few: BCW Tag Team Champ, BCW Heavyweight Champ, MACW Heavyweight Champ, NWA World Tag Team Champ, 2-time PWA Heavyweight Champ, the UIW Heavyweight Champ for over 1,000 days, a 2-time GCW Tag Team Champ, a 6-time GCW Heavyweight Champ. And this isn't even all of them. This is just like half the list of the titles he's held. That's pretty impressive. To date, Joe Dorgan's record is 194 wins, 344 losses, and 9 draws.
Damn.
My goodness.
That's quite the lengthy career there.
I mean, he's still going.
Yeah.
Jeez. Even got jobbed out of his podcast hosting duties.
Yeah.
By a backyard wrestler.
Jeez. Well, thank you, Ryan. Enlightening as always. That's some crazy shit. It's amazing to hear of a jobber that has gone on to form a stable with Jeff Jarrett, even though it's an Impact TNA.
The stable wasn't with Jeff Jarrett. He teamed up with Jeff Jarrett right before he made a stable, but these were all like Guido-style New York guys.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Well, back in the match, at the beginning, we get the official announcement that Shawn Michaels has been attacked by 10 thugs outside of a Syracuse nightclub. And we will touch on that here soon. So
it was the New York connection.
Yeah, I guess.
Johnny Parisi.
Don't think that we're going to forget about that. That's not something that'll get glossed over here.
Oh, Johnny Swinger, get off of him. He's had enough.
Hey!
While the talk is going on at ringside about that, the action in the ring is mediocre at best. Seems like Joe Dorgan was having a hard time deciding what to do, and so stuck to the basics and tried to let Dean Douglas dictate things. For whatever reason, that kind of really didn't work out well. But then we got a phone call from Shawn Michaels himself. Apparently Shawn is well enough to talk on the phone, even though he did sound medicated.
Like the beatdown mattered for that.
Yeah. And while the match is going on, we get a big graphic up and around the screen showing a picture of Shawn Michaels. So just for the record, it seems like everybody is in on burying Dean Douglas, because before we know it, the match is over. Shawn has talked over the match, Shawn's image has been superimposed over the match, and Shawn even talks over Dean Douglas's comments at the end of the match. It was virtually impossible to pay attention to the action in the ring here because we were so focused on Shawn Michaels and what has happened to him. That being said, I couldn't tell you one thing that happened in this Dean Douglas match after that phone call with Shawn started. Ryan, like, did you get anything on this match at all?
Not much. About the only thing I got out of it was, hey, Joe Dorgan's a jobber we haven't done before. Let me see what his career's like. And the other thing was right at the beginning, Joe Dorgan starts making like the diamond cutter hand motion or maybe you're a pussy motion. Like, I don't know. But yeah, that was interesting. And then the match and conversation start, and that's kind of the end of everything. I tried to pay attention what I could to some of the action in the ring, and some of the stuff out of Dean Douglas at least looked like maybe the timing was a little bit better than that Razor match, but he didn't have much to work with here in Joe. I did want to bring up, though, tying into that match with Razor, is recently I watched a shoot interview with Douglas where he says that Razor on purpose was lead-assing him in this match. And he said he basically could tell it from soon as they started. He doesn't know if it was just to make him look like shit or if it was some type of rib for him being the new guy, but he said it was clear Razor was attempting to make him look bad. So that's pretty shitty if true.
Yeah, it seems like these next few months we're going to get some casualties from the Clique. We're going to see Dean Douglas disappear. We're going to see Bam Bam Bigelow disappear. Jean-Pierre Lafitte.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys are all going to be leaving soon because of the Clique. So the match, same with me. I couldn't really pay attention, but the reason why was because, so this is the famous Marines incident or single Marine, depending on who tells the story. We all know about this story. We've all heard it in like shoot interviews and stuff, but I couldn't remember how they handled this. I couldn't believe that Vince basically used that incident to put it into the story. Like, I couldn't remember that at all. So I was just so distracted by just that fact, more so than like, oh, this is distracting from the match.
Yeah, agreed on that. This is something that back in the day I had no awareness of whatsoever. If I saw this particular angle being talked about on Superstars or on Raw, I don't remember it. The only thing that I know about it is what I hear in shoot interviews after the fact, years later, whenever I'm sitting here surfing YouTube and looking up shoot interviews. So yeah, it is pretty shocking that they took this real life event and were able to so deftly twist it into the story, considering the severity of it, the seriousness of it. You know, you have a babyface here that is, for all intents and purposes, the best wrestler in the business at this time, or at least one of the best. And the fact that he gets messed up and gets the shit kicked out of him outside of a bar.
They probably made the decision to do this because it's probably in the news.
Yeah,
so they probably thought, well, let's use that and put it into the storyline to make it.
And if you could say it's 10 individuals, then it doesn't sound like he just got beat up.
Yeah.
And that makes perfect sense. It really does. But at the same time, they are completely ignoring the fact that Nitro exists. It really seemed like this would be one more thing that they would ignore the details of and just gimmick a reason for Shawn's absence. But hey, it works. It did everything they needed it to do here. It furthered a story. It buried Dean Douglas. Everybody's happy with this.
If Bischoff was really an asshole, he would have said, you know what? Shawn Michaels got beat up by one Marine the other night.
And I have it on good authority. It's because Shawn was hitting on him. That's completely made up on my part. But yeah, it was very interesting to see how they were able to include this and that they chose to include it in the story moving forward. So
almost surprising that they chose to include a Two Dudes with Attitude shirt.
Well,
let's go now to what I am going to call the Barry fucking Dudensky appreciation segment. Doc Hendricks.
The studio room that Barry Dudensky built.
Yes. Doc Hendricks is there selling a Two Dudes with Attitudes shirt. And the only phrase that I could think of to describe this shirt is that it was the kind of shirt that a teenage girl would wear.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
This is going to be a little too inside baseball for our listeners out there, but you two will know what I'm talking about. This looked like the kind of shirt that Lindsay Lavender would wear back in high school.
Oh, man.
Yeah, we'll move on from there, but they're going to throw in a WWF classic video along with this shirt purchase. I still don't know what that means or what the content there is. Do either of you guys know just what these classic videos are? We hear a lot about them.
I'm just going to go, just guess here. My guess is they are going to use this to just get rid of any random videotapes they have laying around that they can't sell.
Coliseum overstock.
Right. It's just, in your house too. Yeah, here's one we can give away. WrestleMania 10 or not 10. That was a good one. 11. Yeah, let's give that away.
Maybe this is how the VHS store that we used to go to wound up with their copy of WrestleMania 9 that we used to get all the time. But we move away from that and go to ringside, where the second smaller cage is being constructed. Vince is very smug when he points out that the king will be put in that cage. And then there's an apparent misunderstanding. I guess the king thought that he wouldn't be suspended above the first larger cage, even though it's been clearly said multiple times that the second smaller cage would be dangled above the first larger cage. But I digress.
It wasn't repeated enough times, I guess.
I guess not. That does segue into, I guess, an In Your House report. We haven't had Petting Zoo doing these, thankfully so, but that just means that they are now part of commentary. Vince and the King let us know about the championship match in Your House. That's Diesel defending against the British Bulldog. The Intercontinental Championship, Shawn Michaels defending against Dean Douglas. Maybe, depending on what happens with that. We gotta wait and see what happens. There's the Tag Team Championship, the Smoking Guns defending against Razor Ramon and the 1-2-3 Kid. And it must be noted here that the Kid's picture in the graphic on the screen has an angry face instead of the Kid's usual upbeat look. I don't know if they're maybe tipping their hand about something there, but the Kid usually doesn't look angry in his on-screen graphics. Fatu will also take on Hunter Hearst Helmsley. Goldust will debut against Marty Jannetty.
Teen Idol, Marty Jannetty.
Yeah. And as part of that, the King talks up the return of Marty Jannetty as if we haven't already seen it last week. Goldust cuts a promo for us, albeit brief, on Marty Jannetty. It is short, but it gets to the point, and it was acceptable. I liked it. We're going to take a look back at King of the Ring now. Let's keep looking into the past. These random incursions being shown to us on the screen are going to apparently attempt to justify the feud between Undertaker and Mabel, even though that's not going to happen anymore. And we get video of the 3 or so times they've interacted since the King of the Ring. But for a different perspective, let's go to Paul Bearer for comments on the situation. Paul Bearer here lets us know in what I thought was a pretty great promo considering the circumstances and subject matter that The Undertaker has had his face broken and may never look the same again. Next week on Raw, there's going to be a 20-man battle royal to determine the number 1 contender for the Intercontinental title? That just reeks of the Intercontinental situation that we had almost 2 years ago to the date, involving Razor Ramon, Shawn Michaels, and that whole thing. Before we go to our cage match, there was a lot brought up here in the preceding segment. Ryan, what did you have noted about all of it?
I had nothing noted about the shirts, obviously, except that they existed. They came back to them talking or building the smaller cage, and I wanted to punch the screen when Jerry Lawler seemed to have no clue about the stipulations of this match. The Goldust promo, I thought you mentioned, was very short, but it was also just very classic Goldust promo. I mean, just really gave you the feeling of a Goldust promo that I remember. And then the footage of trying to set up this Mabel Undertaker feud, which is, it's not a great feud, but the promo that Paul Bearer cuts was pretty great. I thought he was wailing louder than he has in quite some time at the beginning here. And then the way they just are zooming in on his face as he's shaking and sweating, and just it solidifies him as the most beautiful man in wrestling. And just a quick story to tie this in with my wife. This week, she saw a picture of Paul Bearer and was disgusted. So she does not have my point of view of how beautiful he is. But
just a picture, or did she see this actual promo?
While I was watching it, yeah.
Do you need us to help you draft some divorce documents? Or?
Yeah, that's a shame. I don't think I can comment. I'm so flustered right now. For In Your House report, one match that I'm looking forward to is the Triple H versus Fatu. You got 2 Hall of Fame legends there in their early stages, so I'm kind of looking forward to that. The Goldust promo, I think the makeup is improving a little bit. I think he's kind of to a point now where the look is there. It looks good. Paul Bearer promo was great because it was just him by himself, and how often do we get that? That was nice. And the Battle Royal just sounds like a clusterfuck because of the Shawn Michaels situation. So, that may have been just a decision they made because of the uncertainty with Shawn Michaels and his health.
Yeah. It's kind of like car wreck curiosity that I'm feeling about that thing that makes you stare at a car wreck as you drive past. I don't expect anything good to come out of it. There are probably some casualties, but I'm still kind of intrigued and I kind of want to see it. If nothing else, just to see what it means for the greater angle going on in the WWF universe at this time. Not necessarily the match itself, but what it means to the bigger picture. Well, guys, we delayed it. We delayed it as long as we could, but now we're going to go into our final match of the night. Bret, the Hitman Hart, defeats Isaac Yankem, DDS, in a steel cage match in 16 minutes and 59 seconds. Bret did not look excited going into this, and they make yet another point of locking the cage to prevent interference. but that the second smaller cage is there in case there's interference. We will get some more details on that later, but at the time, I was not up on this because you're preventing interference, but just in case there's interference, it didn't jive with me at the time. And it still didn't later on. It felt like there was just zero energy going into this match, and in the first few minutes of it, I'm not sure if it was just me or not. I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say about this, but maybe I was just projecting my own just non-excitement onto this. But Bret tries to climb out within the first 4 minutes, and even that didn't feel like there was any urgency to it. It felt like he was going through the motions, and it felt the same way when Yankum tried to climb out 30 seconds later. There's a spot during this match where Bret tries to get out by asking the ref to open the cage. The ref tries, and the ref is unable to do so because the King has switched the locks. We know this because the King shows us the lock, and of course says don't tell anybody, even though he's on national fucking television. This is where I kind of was just like, well, what the fuck? Isn't that interference?
Yeah.
He made such a big deal about not interfering in the cage and not wanting to be in the cage because he's scared of heights, he's got acrophobia, he gets nosebleeds. But then he goes and shows us that he interfered. Just no sense. No sense to that at all. And you know what? I was totally willing to give it to them that switching the locks was a clever move. I was like, okay, you know what? That's pretty good. He switched the locks on it. And, you know, whenever they were talking about it, you could kind of guess that that's what had happened. And you got the confirmation once the King showed you the lock. But, man, he ruins it by showing us the lock. Anyway, back in the match, there's a special bulletin across the bottom of the screen called 1-900-SHAMELESS for more information on the Shawn Michaels situation.
Let's make money on his injury.
It's option 6, in case you're wondering. Hopefully JR has some new info on that. I don't know.
Proceeds to benefit Shawn's plastic surgery.
Proceeds to benefit Shawn's pharmacy bill, more like.
Ooh.
And
that'd be a steep bill.
Yeah.
And of course, when Bret Hart is about to escape the cage, Lawler has to interfere. Despite everything that's been said, despite all of the warnings, Vince just talks this off as saying that he lost himself. He was beside himself. He just has to interfere. But this also leads to Vince getting the payoff that he was looking for with all of this as he roars, "Put him in the cage! It's where he belongs!" And the officials do come out and do that. And of course it becomes a spectacle. Vince is calling the actions of the officials instead of the action in the ring. Things such as, "Yes, shut the door! Lock it! Now they're raising the cage!" Again, instead of calling the match, he is calling the caging of Jerry Lawler. This is more or less where I completely gave up on this match. Lawler gets the nosebleed that he's been threatening all along, up there in the cage. And meanwhile, the action does continue in the ring. For me, none of it was noteworthy past that point. Vince's frantic commentary did not give this any energy at all. We do get to Bret climbing out of the cage to win the match, and then immediately cut to commercial, come back to Vince putting over In Your House this Sunday night before fading to black. I hated everything about this and truly believe, and you know, this is up for debate, obviously, but I truly believe that this is one of the worst Bret Hart matches I have ever seen. It's not quite up to, you know, the I Quit match, the submission match with Backlund, but it's one of the worst Bret Hart matches I have ever seen. Joe, what did you think about this match and the way that our go-home episode of Raw ended? Because that's a point that we didn't hear much of during this episode. This is the go-home episode into In Your House.
Yeah, and I can't believe that I watched a match that involved Bret Hart, Jerry Lawler, and Glenn Jacobs as Yankum that I have nothing positive to note. 3 absolute legend Hall of Famers, and this was just hokey, cartoon dumb shit with all of them. The Jerry Lawler stuff just ruined this whole thing. And they put a fucking earpiece and microphone in the birdcage, like, so he can communicate, and then the nosebleed. And I just noted, this is the worst shit I've ever seen. Like, this is horrible. And how did we even grow to love Jerry Lawler? I guess maybe because he was just better with JR, just a good team.
Yeah.
But man, is this bad. And with Isaac Yankem, Glenn Jacobs, he's a 300-pound monster-looking guy, but he doesn't really work like a monster to me. He's kind of a slightly more athletic version of Sid to me.
Wow.
Is how he works. He's awkward. And I think that maybe when he went into the Kane character, he kind of slowed things down and it was able to work for him a little bit better. But this match to me, Bret Hart was carrying the match, and it was just too clear that Bret Hart was carrying this match against this monster.
I mean, there's all sorts of problems with this match. And it, of course, starts with the tiny cage that they show us. I mean, that's the glaring problem about this entire situation here. And it starts off with the King reminding us that he's the key to tonight's victory and that Isaac Yankem's victory is under lock and key. So, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that his interruption is going to involve the lock and key somehow. But as the stuff in the ring starts, I mean, some of it was okay. I thought it was impressive the first time Yankem went to climb out of the ring. You could just see his size. He was able to put his hands over the top of the cage from a standing position. I mean, that just kind of showed, what a monster he is. But one of my biggest problems with this is, and I don't know if I'm just sick of cage matches, but it just had all of the same standard and at this point boring moves that happen in a cage match. Oh, someone's going to try and get over the top. Oh, their ankle was grabbed. He gets drugged back in. Oh, he's almost over. Oh, the other guy grabbed his hair. He pulls him in by his hair. It's the same stuff time and time again. And adding the stupid shit with the King just made it 10 times worse. Like you said, Bartlett, the first time when he shows the lock, that he's interrupted, all right, I hate this gimmick, but let's at least stay consistent with it. Yeah. Why was that not when he was put in the cage? He clearly interrupted with the match. At least stay on your own stupid story. I mean, as predicted last week, when he gets in the ring, that's where all the focus goes. And at that point, we don't even care about the match. And that's probably why Bret Hart had zero interest, because he knew what the fuck was going to happen. Yeah. He knew this was just some stupid gimmick match that no one was going to pay attention to and was going to be ruined by ridiculous antics at the end. I can't really add too much else because it is a shock. 3 absolute legends here, and we just kill it. We kill it with stupid matches, stupid gimmicks, and stupid storylines.
Yeah.
Yeah, if this was on a pay-per-view, this would have been absolutely roasted.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I completely agreed on that. So I never thought that I would be in the position of saying this, but I would have popped my ass off if the King didn't end up in the second, smaller cage. What kind of a fucking gimmick is that when you hope that it doesn't come into play? You guys made excellent points on this that I didn't hit on my breakdown, so I don't really want to spend too much time on it other than to say, Joe, you said that it seemed like Bret Hart was carrying this match. I honestly have to disagree with you on that one. It felt like to me that if anything, Bret Hart had the ability to make this match interesting if he wanted to, and he just didn't give a shit. And it made it obvious throughout all of it.
I guess I need to clear up when I say carrying, I mean like he was calling this match.
I see.
You could clearly tell he was controlling the match, not like carrying it on his shoulders like, oh, he's doing a great job. Right. I didn't mean that.
Gotcha. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, because it's That was the biggest thing that turned me off about this. And I noticed it from the beginning, and I mentioned it at the beginning of the match. It just seemed like there was no excitement or urgency from the participants. And that lack of urgency and that lack of excitement was crystal fucking clear through the screen to me as the viewer, you know. Nobody in universe cared, so therefore nobody out of the universe cared, I guess is a great way of putting it. But you know, one thing that I do want to press both of you guys on, and Joe, I want to hear your response first on this, because again, neither of you touched on it. This is our go home show in your house.
Right.
You know,
right.
What is this doing for us as the viewers, taking us into a pay-per-view that we are expected to spend money on?
Yeah, I mean, aside from the in your house report, we didn't really get anything that would lead us into the show. Last week, like I said, Nitro had a steel cage match, so I feel like they just threw this in to compete.
Yeah, it seems like some of it is a case of misfortune, right? You have the Undertaker who's injured. You have Shawn Michaels who is still kind of laying low to try and heal up. So there's two big people that are going to be involved in, well, one of them and maybe two of them should have been involved here, and now they're gone right before. So, you know, I give them a little bit of leeway in that I think that some of their stars that they wanted to use leading into the next In Your House are simply not available for this show. So that's unfortunate, but they didn't do a good job with it, that's for sure.
Yeah. And I just wanted to get some clarity on that, because from my own personal perspective, if this is their last effort to get me to open my wallet and to call my cable provider, it's not happening off of the strength of this episode. I don't give a shit how cheap the pay-per-view is going to be. There's nothing about this that is enticing me to put in the effort of making the phone call and ordering it. So we'll see. We will see how this pay-per-view stacks up against every other pay-per-view we've seen in 95 so far. From what I hear, it's not that great. But then again, I have never seen it before. So we'll find out. And that's it. That is the end of our episode of Raw. And so now we are going to kick it on over to highlights and lowlights. Ryan, why don't you go first with it?
My highlight is the Paul Bearer promo. I loved him. I thought he did a good job here, despite the disagreement with my wife. I think he's fantastic. Low light, very easy. The final match, and specifically the smaller cage above the other cage. That just helped ruin an already lackluster match. So, sad situation there.
That small cage that happened to have a microphone and earpiece in it.
Wired up.
Yeah. My highlight was just seeing how they handled the Shawn Michaels incident. That was a highlight for me. And low light, I'm agreeing with Ryan. Just everything about that final match was just the shits.
Okay, well, yeah, we're going to go 3 for 3 on the low light. My low light is the final match. Everything about it, fucking terrible. The highlight for me for this episode was seeing Barry Horowitz not in his Hava Nagila gimmick and making an attempt to get himself over in his own way. I was very happy to see that he wasn't decked out in the gimmick clothing. I know that's a small highlight to take away from things, but it did genuinely make me happy. So,
and notice how all three of us for a highlight did not pick a match. We had to go out there and scrape either through a vignette or a promo or
Yeah. I mean, that is definitely worth noting. It says something about the content we're being given. All right. Well, yeah. That all fits. It really does. This fucking episode. This go-home episode. Joe, please, why don't you give us some entertaining, interesting, contemporary news from on and around October 16th, 1995?
Well, as we know already, it's been quite the week for the WWF. Anything can happen. in the WWF. And I will start with something that wasn't one of the events, one of the things that happened during this week, and that is that Dave Meltzer is reporting that the WWF is dropping the women's division, but they will send Alundra Blaze to All Japan as a regular to work as the WWF champion. So they're thinking about doing a PG-13 with Alundra in Japan. That's how bad.
They don't give a shit at all.
Yes.
Jesus.
So that's what Meltzer's reporting. So we'll see what happens there. So let's get into the crazy week here for the WWF. It all started about a week ago. The Undertaker injury occurred, which we talked about in a match with Mabel. And right after that, so this had to be on Thursday, right before this Raw. Do you guys remember that I reported just a couple weeks ago that Bill Watts joined WWF?
Yeah.
Well, he gone.
Oh.
He quit over an apparent disagreement with Vince McMahon over what being in charge actually meant. So he's gone. And later that same night, outside a bar in Syracuse, New York, Shawn Michaels was involved in a one-sided street fight with several servicemen and was pounded into the pavement and hospitalized. That is direct from the Observer. And not direct from the Observer. I think there are several versions of this Shawn Michaels story, depending on who you talk to. But in the Observer, Dave Meltzer notes that the only consistency with the Michaels story is that it involved Shawn Michaels, Davey Boy Smith, and the 1-2-3 Kid, Sean Waltman. They were drinking at a bar in Syracuse, and Meltzer says that they called a taxi, but the taxis were all booked. So a bar bouncer got his girlfriend to drive them back to their hotel. And if you hear some of these stories, Davey Boy Smith and Sean Waltman were stuck in the back seat of the vehicle and couldn't get out while Shawn Michaels was getting his ass kicked. And eventually they were able to get out of the vehicle and help.
Wow.
That's the Shawn Michaels incident. And it's funny because, Ryan, you mentioned last week the thing with him and Sonny. Like, was this when Sonny started what you said, being a whore? and if you listen to some Tammy Sitch shoot interviews, she mentions that she kind of like helped Shawn, like helped nurse him back to health here during this time.
So we're right there.
So this is kind of where the seed was planted.
So to speak. Yeah. So this was quite the time period here for WWF. Yeah, turbulent.
Yes. Now, this was actually the second incident of the week involving Shawn Michaels. At the October 5th charity show in Madison Square Garden.
Not the charity show.
Shawn Michaels was confronted by the Blue Brothers in the dressing room. According to the story, Don Harris of the Blue Brothers put a chair against the dressing room door to keep anyone from coming in, and Ron Harris, his brother, snatched Michaels by the throat and held him up against the wall. The Blue Brothers' final WWF date was on October 9th, so no disciplinary action was taken. So this is another story that I've heard Jim Cornette talk about.
Yeah.
I've heard a couple other guys.
That's some SS tactics there.
You know you're being a shithead when the guys with the SS tattoos are sick of your shit.
This is quite the week for Shawn Michaels. Let's just put it that way. That's pretty much it. So Bill Watts quit. Shawn Michaels got his ass kicked on two different incidents. And The Undertaker had his face crushed by Mabel.
By an unprofessional slob.
Yes.
My God.
And the Tammy Sitch and Shawn Michaels affair has officially kicked off.
As she nurses him back.
Now, this is all coming from her, so who knows? But it's funny because when she talks about this story, she says that British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith, came to hers and Chris's hotel room, and she went and saw Shawn Michaels and was like, oh, we have to call an ambulance. Like, he's fucked up. And then she went to the hospital with him, and Davey Boy Smith went back to the bar.
This whole thing, the way that you've described it here from the shoot interviews, you know, Sonny nursing Shawn Michaels back to health. I just get this image in my mind of, you know, the classical view of like Cleopatra feeding grapes to Caesar.
Yeah.
But instead it's Sonny feeding painkillers to Shawn Michaels. Oh, boy. Well, you know, we said it in the episode earlier, and I reiterated here. I am very curious to see where we go from here.
And by the way, because of all this craziness, no update on Tatanka.
Oh, sad.
Yeah.
Disappointing Native Americans all around the world.
Worldwide. All right. Thank you, Joseph. Illuminating as always. And that's it, folks. We are done with this one. I want to thank you again for joining us. And if you like what we're doing here and want to connect with us, you can find us on every major social media and podcast subscription platform by searching up the handle Wrasslin Raw. That's WRASSLINRAW. While you're there, don't forget to click subscribe to get every episode of Wrasslin Raw coming to you every week. Give us a 5-star review and let your friends know about the fastest growing wrestling podcast in the world. Next week on Wrasslin Raw, we're going to take a look at In Your House 4 with matches featuring Goldust, Razor Ramon, and many more. So, for Joe and Ryan, I'm Jason, and this has been Wrasslin Raw.